With firmness and serenity, she said that the cycle between them had ended long before, that his "I never loved you" had been a painful yet liberating gift, that he would never love someone he didn't see as an extension of his own reflection. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post every day. Continuing. Marina always knew that words had power. She grew up amidst the golden threads her mother, Constance, wove in her small sewing workshop in the historic center of Williamsburg, Virginia. The colonial house, with its stone walls and windows overlooking the steep, cobblestone streets, echoed with the sounds of the sewing machine and the stories Constance told as she worked. "Dignity isn't bought in a department store, daughter," she would always say, her skilled fingers adjusting a hem. "And dreams have no size, they have courage." Marina absorbed every word as if it were ink on blank paper. At 17, when the letter from Columbia University arrived, confirming her full scholarship in literature, Constance cried for the first time in front of her daughter. Not from sadness, but from a pride so profound that tears were the only way to express it. "You're going to show this world that a small-town girl also has a voice," she whispered, hugging Marina tightly. New York City embraced Marina like an urban tsunami. The Columbia University campus, with its imposing buildings and students in expensive clothes, seemed like a parallel universe. She carried her worn backpack and her used books with the determination of someone who knew that every opportunity was earned, never given. It was on one of those October afternoons in the Central Library that their paths first crossed. Robert "Rob" Ashford Spencer had the kind of presence that made people turn their heads. Tall, with impeccably styled brown hair, dressed with the casual elegance of someone who never had to worry about money. He was the son of one of America's agribusiness magnates, the future heir to an empire that stretched from the Midwest to Congress. At 23, he was studying business administration, more out of family protocol than vocation, and treated the university as an extension of the private clubs he frequented. Their first encounter was almost an accident. Marina was carrying a stack of books on American literature when she tripped on the library stairs. The books flew, and Rob, who was coming down the stairs talking on his cell phone about some business deal, instinctively helped her gather everything. For a moment, their eyes met. His, brown like dark honey, showed a spark of genuine curiosity that rarely appeared. Jane Austen, Virginia Woolf, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He read the titles as he handed them back. "You have good taste." "Thank you," Marina replied, feeling her cheeks warm. There was something in his voice and a deep, captivating tone that unsettled her. "Rob," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Marina." The handshake lasted longer than it should have, and so it began. In the following months, their meetings became frequent. Rob would appear at the library with flimsy excuses to talk about literature, an area in which he was clearly not well versed, but he showed a curiosity that seemed genuine. Marina, initially suspicious, gradually allowed herself to be drawn in by this unexpected attention. He listened to her talk about Emily Dickinson and Robert Frost with an intensity that made her feel seen, valued. Their conversations evolved into coffees, then into long walks across the university campus, and eventually into dinners at restaurants Marina had never imagined frequenting. Rob had a knack for making her feel special, unique. He spoke about how her perspective on life fascinated him, how the simplicity of her observations was more profound than all the sophistication he had grown up with. "You're different from all the women I've known," he said one night, as they walked across the university campus under a starry sky. "You have a purity, a truth I've never seen before." Marina felt her heart race. At that moment, she believed that love could truly cross any social barrier, that two opposite worlds could merge into one. The first time Rob took her to meet his friends was at a sophisticated bar in Greenwich Village. Marina chose her best outfit, a blouse Constance had sewn especially for her, and dressed with the care of someone who knew she was being evaluated. Rob's group was exactly what she expected. Rich, beautiful young people, dressed in brands that cost more than the rent of her boarding house. The introductions were cordial, but Marina felt the weight of their assessing glances. The questions came disguised as interest. "Where are you from again? What do your parents do? What neighborhood do you live in? Each answer seemed to diminish the initial smile of those present a little more. Rob, by her side, was different, less attentive, less affectionate, as if he were playing a role. Marina tried to convince herself it was her paranoia, but the following weeks confirmed her suspicions. Rob started cancelling dates, taking longer to reply to messages. When they were together, he seemed distant, as if a part of him was always somewhere else. Conversations about literature gave way to monologues about family business, about people Marina didn't know, about a world to which she clearly didn't belong. The last straw came on a March afternoon at the same coffee shop where they had had so many special conversations. Rob arrived late, in a hurry, talking on his cell phone. When he finally hung up, he looked at Marina with an expression she would never forget. Cold, distant, almost annoyed. "Marina, we need to talk," he began, and she already knew nothing good would follow. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he continued, playing with the sugar bowl, "and I think we want different things from life." "What do you mean?" she asked, feeling her stomach twist. "Look, you're an incredible person, but—" He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "We come from very different worlds. I have responsibilities, family expectations. I need someone who understands that universe." Marina felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. "Rob, I can learn, I can adapt." "It's not about adaptation," he interrupted her, and the coldness in his voice was like a blade. "It's about origin, about one's place in the world." He sighed, as if doing her a favor by being honest. "The truth is, I never truly loved you. It was an interesting experience. But you're on a different level, Marina, and I need someone on mine." The words fell on her like a hailstorm. Marina remained silent for long seconds, processing the cruelty of those phrases. Rob stood up, left money on the table, and before leaving said, "I hope you understand. It wasn't personal. As if her heart were a business contract he was terminating. Marina sat in that coffee shop for hours, watching the afternoon turn into night. The tears came in waves, each carrying pieces of her dreams. When she finally managed to move, she called her mother. "Mom," was all she could say before collapsing into sobs. "Come home, daughter. Come home." The trip back to Williamsburg was the longest of Marina's life. Each mile seemed to carry the weight of humiliation, of lost innocence, of shattered trust. Constance waited for her at the door, with open arms and a lap always available for her sorrows. For weeks, Marina barely left her room. She deleted all social media, blocked Rob's number, tried to erase any trace of those months that now seemed like a nightmare. Constance respected her daughter's silence, but left trays of food at her door and, occasionally, sat on the bed to keep her company, sewing in silence. "Do you know what I've learned sewing my whole life?" she said one of those afternoons, without taking her eyes off her embroidery. "When fabric tears, we don't throw it away. We sew it back together, and the mend is always stronger than the rest." Marina looked at her mother, feeling something stir within her, a small spark, but real. "What if I don't know how to sew?" she asked with a choked voice. "Then I'll teach you," Constance smiled. "Thread by thread, stitch by stitch." It was Constance who suggested Marina return to New York City, but this time on her own terms. "Wuss, you can't let that boy ruin your dreams," she said, as she helped her daughter pack. "You have talent, you have strength. Now you need courage." Marina returned to the city 6 months later, transformed. The pain had crystallized into determination. If Rob thought she had no place in that world, she would create her own. She got a job at a small publishing house downtown, starting as an administrative assistant. The salary was low, the work demanding, but every book that passed through her hands fueled a dream that was being reborn. During the day, she stacked boxes, organized inventory, answered phone calls. At night, she read manuscripts, learned about the publishing market, took online courses on entrepreneurship. She lived in a tiny studio apartment in Chinatown, ate instant noodles more often than she should have, but for the first time in months, she felt she was building something all her own. The idea for Free Words was born on a sleepless night, as Marina read the rejected manuscript of a woman who told her story of overcoming an abusive relationship. The publishing house where she worked had refused the book for not having enough commercial appeal. Marina felt a familiar fury rise in her chest. How many important stories were being silenced because they didn't fit the standard of what sold? It took 2 years of rigorous saving, extra work, and sleepless nights to raise the initial money. Constance sold some of her old jewelry to help, and Marina moved into a small commercial space in Greenwich Village, which served as both office and home. The first publication from Free Words was exactly that rejected manuscript. The book sold modestly, but the online reviews were moving. Readers wrote saying they felt seen, understood, less alone. The publishing house grew slowly, but consistently. Marina developed a keen eye for stories that touched universal wounds. She published accounts of overcoming adversity, romances that avoided clichés, biographies of ordinary women who had done extraordinary things. Each book was chosen not only for its commercial potential, but for the human impact it could have. 3 years later, when the pandemic transformed the world, Free Words became a refuge for readers hungry for hope and authenticity. Sales soared, and Marina was invited to podcasts, interviews, lectures. She, who was once discarded for being on a different level, was now recognized as one of the country's most innovative publishers. It was during a literary fair in New York City that Daniel appeared in her life. A 40-year-old architect and divorced, father of a teenager, he approached the Free Words booth with a book in his hand and moist eyes. "This book saved my daughter," he said, showing one of the titles Marina had published about adolescent depression. She was going through a very difficult time, and reading the story of this girl who overcame everything made her realize she wasn't alone. Marina was touched. Unlike others who sought her out interested in the publisher's success, Daniel spoke about the real impact of books on people's lives. They talked for hours at that fair, and she discovered a sensitive man who understood pain because he had lived his own sea, who valued art because he knew the transformative power it held. Daniel didn't court her in a traditional way. He didn't send expensive flowers or take her to sophisticated restaurants. Instead, he appeared at the publishing house with coffee and a cinnamon roll from a bakery she had mentioned liking. He recommended books he thought she would enjoy. He listened to her frustrations about the publishing market with genuine interest. He treated her as a person, not a trophy. The love between them grew in the unspoken, in the comfortable silences, in the shared laughter. Daniel had infinite patience with Marina's insecurities, never forced intimacy, waited for her to feel safe. When they finally kissed, on a rainy night while organizing books in the stockroom, Marina felt she was learning what it was to truly love and be loved. For 2 years, they lived a solid and mature relationship. Daniel became not only a boyfriend, but a partner, confidant, best friend. Marina started writing again, something she had abandoned since Rob. She slept better, laughed more, allowed herself to be happy without guilt. It was on an ordinary Tuesday that the past knocked on the publishing house's door. Marina was revising a manuscript when her secretary announced, "A Robert Ashford Spencer wants to speak with you. He says it's personal." Marina felt her blood run cold. For a moment, she considered sending him away, but curiosity was stronger. When Rob entered the room, she barely recognized him. Still handsome, still elegant, but there was something different. Perhaps it was she who was different. "Marina," he said, and his smile was the same as always, calculated and charming. "You look incredible, different." "Rob," she replied, keeping her voice firm. "What do you want?" He sat down uninvited, looking around the room with approval. "Impressive what you've built. I read about the publishing house, about your success. I always knew you had potential." The hypocrisy of his words was like a slap. Marina remembered all the times he had diminished her dreams, treated her background as a flaw. "I came here because—" He paused, as if rehearsing. "Because I made a mistake I regret every day. I was young, immature, family pressure. You know how it is." Marina said nothing, just watched him continue his performance. "The truth is I never managed to forget you," Rob continued. "All these years you were here in my mind. And now, seeing what you've become, I realize I was right about you from the beginning. You are special." "Special," Marina repeated, savoring the irony of the word. "I want a second chance," he said, leaning forward. I want to make up for lost time. We can make this work now. We're two successful adults, on the same level. There it was, the same hierarchical mindset as always. Now that she had risen in status, she deserved his love. Marina stood up, walked to the window overlooking the busy street. She thought of Constance, of the night spent sewing her soul back together. She thought of Daniel, waiting at home with dinner ready and infinite patience. She thought of the girl from Williamsburg, who believed that love meant accepting crumbs. You know, Rob, she said, turning to face him. You're right about one thing. I've changed a lot, but not in the way you imagine. She returned to her chair, assuming a posture of someone in control of the situation. Today I understand that when you said I never loved you, you were being honest. You truly didn't love me, because love requires seeing a person as they are, not as an extension of your ego. Rob frowned, clearly not expecting that response. You didn't reject me because I was on a different level, Marina continued, feeling an unprecedented freedom in speaking those truths. You rejected me because you are incapable of loving anyone who isn't a reflection of yourself, and you know what I discovered. That was the best gift you could have given me. Marina, you're being too harsh. I'm being real, she interrupted him. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely real. If you hadn't broken me that way, I never would have discovered who I truly am. I never would have built all this. I never would have found someone who loves me entirely, not despite who I am. Rob shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That someone... Are you dating? I'm loving, Marina corrected. There's a difference. Silence stretched between them. Rob seemed to be processing the fact that his old charm strategy wasn't working. Look, if it's a matter of money, I can invest in the publishing house. We can be partners. Marina laughed. A clean, liberating laugh. Rob, you really don't understand, do you? This was never about money. It was about respect, about seeing value where you only saw flaws. She stood up again, this time walking towards the door. Thank you for coming, she said, opening the door. I needed this closure. I needed to look into your eyes and confirm that I feel nothing anymore, neither anger nor resentment, just indifference. Rob stood up, clearly disconcerted. Marina, it can't be like this. We had something special. You had a fantasy, she replied. I had a dream. They are different things. After he left, Marina stayed alone in her office for a while, processing what had happened. For years, she had imagined what it would be like to see Rob again. She had fantasized about speeches of revenge, moments of triumph, where she could show how foolish he had been to lose her. But the reality was simpler and deeper. She simply didn't care anymore. When Daniel arrived that night, he found Marina cooking, something she did when she was especially happy. He hugged her from behind, kissing her neck. How was your day? He asked. The past came to visit me, she said, turning in his arms, and I discovered it no longer lives here. Daniel looked at her with curiosity, but didn't press. That was how he was. Present when she needed him, respectful when she didn't want to talk. I love you, Marina said, surprising herself with the intensity of the phrase. It wasn't the first time she had said it, but this time it sounded different, definitive. I love you too, he replied, smiling. Forever. That night, Marina called Constance. Mom, remember when you said the mend is always stronger where it tore? I remember, daughter. You were right. I'm whole again. Better than whole. I'm complete. On the other end of the line, Constance smiled. Her girl had learned the difference between being loved and loving herself, between accepting crumbs and building a feast, between dreaming of approval and creating her own worth. Marina hung up the phone and looked out the window of her apartment, now shared with Daniel and decorated with plants they cared for together. The city stretched out below, full of stories waiting to be told, and she, the girl from Williamsburg who was once considered on a different level, now knew that all levels were an illusion, that the only real place was the one we build for ourselves, line by line, word by word, love by love. Free Words would continue publishing stories of overcoming, and the greatest of them would always be her own, the girl who transformed rejection into reconstruction, pain into purpose, and never again let anyone define her worth except herself.